Hello all, welcome to another session in this course. As part of this session, I'm going to cover the next topic, that is constructor chaining in JavaScript. So let's get started. So what is the topic I'm going to cover in this session? Constructor chaining in JavaScript. Let me type it here. Constructor chaining. What is this constructor chaining in JavaScript? You know that when you create a class, inside a class, you can create a constructor, right? To initialize the variables of the class for each and every object. We generally create the constructors inside the classes, generally. Okay. So assume that there is a constructor, sorry, there is a class. Assume that there is another class, and assume that this class is inheriting the properties from this class. So this class is called as a parent class, basically. Okay. The class from which the properties are getting inherited by other class is called as a parent class. This is a parent class. This is a parent class. The class from which the properties are getting inherited by another class is called as a parent class. The class which is actually inheriting the properties from another class is called as a child class. This one is a child class. In this kind of situation, assume that in the parent class there is a constructor, and in the child class also there is a constructor. You created the constructor here and here. Now, if you create an object for the child class, okay, if you create an object for the child class, when you create an object for the child class, assume like this, you create an object for the child class, guys. What will happen? What will happen when you create an object for a child class? The child class constructor need to be called. This particular constructor need to be called. But this constructor, before it is executed, the parent class constructor need to be executed. According to the constructor chaining, guys, okay, even though you create an object for the child class, before the child class constructor get executed, first the parent class constructor need to be executed. That's the rule. As part of the constructor chaining mechanism in JavaScript, when the child class constructor is called, before the code inside this constructor of the child class get executed, first the parent class constructor need to be executed, then only the child class constructor will be executed. So what will happen if this is not happening according to the constructor chaining, and what are the challenges and all? Okay. All these things I'm going to cover. So this is theoretical part for now, but I'm going to make it practical so that you'll understand what exactly is constructor chaining after this practical demonstration. I'll go to this Visual Studio Code and create a new file, that is demo.js. And here I'm going to create a class animal. Class animal. I'm going to create two classes, guys. One is animal class, another one is dog class. Okay. I want to make this dog class a child of the animal class using the extends keyword as covered in the previous session. Like class-based inheritance in JavaScript, how to make a particular class a child class of another class by using extends keyword. Now, in the parent class, that is animal parent class, I'm going to create a constructor, guys. I'm going to create a constructor here. Okay. And I'm going to create a constructor, empty constructor basically. And here I'm going to write a print statement saying animal constructor. I'll just write animal constructor here. Here also in the dog class also I'm going to create a constructor, guys. Okay. In this constructor, I'm going to write down dog constructor. Okay. Here I'm going to create dog constructor. Here I'm going to create here I'm going to write animal constructor and a dog constructor here. Okay. So dog is a child class of the animal class, and here both have that. Okay. Now I'm going to create an object for the child class, that is the dog class. That is, I'll just write like this: const dog is equal to new dog. So in this object creation statement, this part will call the constructor of the child class. Okay, the constructor of the child class will be called. The constructor of the child class will be called. When the constructor of the child class is called, okay. So a lot of people think that dog constructor will get executed, and that dog constructor will be printed and without any error and all. But before, even though you create an object for the child class and the dog class constructor is getting called, but before the dog class constructor got executed, as per the constructor chaining mechanism or constructor chaining kind of rule in JavaScript, first the parent class constructor need to be executed before the child class constructor. But here I'm creating an object for the child class, so constructor of the child class only will be called. But what about the parent class constructor? If it is not getting executed, what will happen and all? Okay, let's see that. You are going to get an error, guys. Okay, the code is not going to run in a proper way. So let me run this code and see that we'll get an error in the output console. Okay, so demo.js, if I say, you see, even though dog constructor has been printed here, but here you see console.log dot constructor must call super constructor in derived class before accessing this or returning from the derived constructor at new, and all this kind of error. Some kind of error is coming. The reason behind the error is we are not obeying the rules of the constructor chaining, where before the child class constructor is executed, the parent class constructor need to get executed. So for that, inside the constructor of the child class, write like this, super, like this. Okay, super means, super circular bracket means constructor of the parent class need to be called. Okay, first I need to call the constructor of the parent class. Once it gets executed, then only the constructor of the child class need to get executed. So to overcome this particular error, I need to write this super. Okay, now clear this out and run this code again. You see, this time it is perfectly working. First animal constructor is called, then dog constructor is called. So this is the rule of the constructor chaining, guys. What if the child class constructor is getting executed before the parent class constructor? So you are going to get that error. Just now I showed you, right? But to overcome that, I have written super method kind of stuff. Okay. So this is a constructor calling statement. Okay. It will call the parent class constructor. All good. Okay. All good so far. What if, what if, guys, this is a constructor chaining mechanism. What if, we have this name here. Okay. Name here, name, comma, breed. Okay. Like this are there. Here only name parameter is there, but here name and breed are there. In that kind of case, how this constructor chaining will be useful here is, here I'll write down this dot name is equal to name. And here, when I'm calling this super class constructor, as part of the constructor chaining, I need to call this constructor before this constructor gets executed. What I will do here is super of, I'll just pass name here, only name I will pass. Okay. And then say this dot breed is equal to breed. Like this I'll write. Okay. You don't have to initialize all this variables in the child class. Okay. So repetition, you see multiple classes will be inheriting this animal class. In that case, this name no need to be inherited by all the child classes, guys. Okay. So this particular name in this example will be initialized by the animal class only, and all the child classes don't have to repeat this code. So repetition of the code is gone here. The repetition of the code in initializing the variables across multiple child classes is gone. This is only initialized at the parent level, and anyhow this will be inherited by the child classes. So only the thing that is specific to the child class need to be initialized here. Okay, whatever the common thing in the parent class can be initialized in the parent class. Okay, so this is what is another advantage of the constructor chaining. So here also we need to call this, guys. If you don't call this super of name here, right, okay, you are going to get the error. For example, if I put a comment here, so what will happen in this case? What will happen? Even though here I'll pass something like name is equal to Tommy, okay, breed is equal to then okay, German Shepherd. Like this, if I write, okay, if I write this code like this, so will this be executed? You'll get error, guys. Okay, you're going to get the error. Now you're going to get the error. You see, this dot breed is equal to breed, and reference must call the super constructor in the derived class. How to call the super constructor? Uncomment this part. Super of name you need to pass. Okay, this name will be initialized in the parent class. So there is a purpose of the constructor chaining also to, remove the repetition of the initialization of the class variable in multiple child classes for this animal class. You are doing that common class variable initialization in the parent class itself. That's what is an advantage you are going to get. The once I have uncommented the super of name, right, this is going to work fine. You see, animal constructor, dog constructor got printed here. Okay, that's all good. Okay, it's working. Code is working fine. So this is called as constructor chaining in JavaScript, guys. Okay, this is called as a constructor chaining in JavaScript. So before the child class constructor is executed or called or executed, the constructor in the child class need to call the constructor in the parent class. Okay, the constructor in the child class need to call the constructor in the parent class using the super. Okay, then only the things will be resolved. And this concept is called as a constructor chaining in JavaScript, guys. So hope guys you understood what exactly is constructor chaining in JavaScript. So that's all for this session. See you in the next session. Thank you. Bye bye. Hello all, welcome to another session in this course. As part of this session, I'm going to cover the next topic, that is default constructors in JavaScript. So let's get started. What exactly are these default constructors in JavaScript? So in the previous sessions, I covered a lot about constructors, guys. Now I'm going to cover about the default constructors in JavaScript language. So in a class, if you don't create a constructor and for that class, if you are creating an object, still nothing will happen. Even though in the object creation statement, you are calling a constructor, but inside the class, you have not created a constructor. How this is possible, I'm going to cover in this session with practical demonstration, guys. For that, I'll just launch this Visual Studio Code, and here, let me create a JavaScript file, and here I'm going to create a class. I'll just name this class as animal class. So inside this animal class, I'm going to create a method, let's say eat method, let's say. Let me create a sample method, let's say eat method, and here I'll write animal is eating. Okay, when this particular method inside this class is called, I'll just print animal is eating. That's it. Now inside this particular animal class, do you see any constructor created apart from this method? Is there any constructor created, guys? No, right? There's no constructor. So when I say new animal, okay, when I create an object using the new keyword for this animal class, okay, let's say a is equal to, and object reference name is, okay, const a is equal to new animal. If I say here, this is a constructor calling statement in the animal class, but there is no constructor, but I am still calling the constructor while creating the object for this animal class. So will I get any error? Will I get any error with this? So even I'll use this object reference to call this method also, guys, in that class. Let's see what will happen. Will I get any error? Because I'm calling the constructor, but the constructor is not created inside the animal class. So is any problem going to happen? No demo.js. No problem will come, guys. If you run this, you see animal is eating got printed. But what about this animal constructor? Okay, I'm calling this constructor of the animal class, but since there is no constructor in the animal class, I'm not getting any error here. Rather, the program is working perfectly fine. The reason behind that is JavaScript will maintain a default constructor here. Okay, default inbuilt empty constructor JavaScript will maintain. There will be a constructor whether you create here or not. There will be one constructor, guys, like this. There will be one constructor created by the JavaScript like this. An empty constructor which doesn't have any code, okay, doesn't have any parameters, will be maintained inbuilt by the JavaScript language. Whether you write this, also same logic, right? You see, when I run this, you will get the same output. If you remove this also, okay, if you remove this also, by default, a default constructor is maintained by the animal class. That is the reason when you create an object for the animal class and we are calling the animal class constructor, since there is no constructor visible here, but still I'm not getting the problem because this animal class, any class in JavaScript will maintain a default constructor. If no constructor exists here, if no constructor is created, then default constructor will be considered by the class. So here, a default empty constructor, okay, which doesn't have any code will be, you see, let me comment this, but this will be internally maintained by this any class in JavaScript. Fine. So this is what is a default constructor, guys. Now you will get a question like, what if there is another situation where you have this animal class and you created one more class, which is a child class, dog extends animal. Okay, this is another situation, guys. Here, I created a child class for this animal class. And here in this child class, I'm not going to create any constructor, but I'm going to create, let's say, some method or something. Okay. Or else let's keep it like this. Okay. I'll not create any constructor, guys. But now, I'll not create a constructor inside the dog class, but I'm going to create a constructor here. Okay. I'll just remove this part. Here, animal class is there. Here, dog class is there. Okay. Dog class is a child class of the animal class. In the animal class, I'm creating a constructor, but in the child class, I'm not creating any constructor. Here, okay, I'm creating a constructor like this. This dot name is equal to name. And here console.log, I'll print the name. Okay. So here in the parent class, I created a constructor, but in the child class, there is no constructor. In this kind of situation, when I create an object for the child class like this, and when I create an object for the child class like this, const d is equal to or dog is equal to like this, if I write, and here if I pass some name, okay, let's say Tommy or something, if I pass here, what will happen? Will this work? You see, I'm calling the, okay, what I'm doing here, guys, I'm calling a constructor here, okay? In this object creation statement for the dog class, I'm calling a constructor here, which is actually passing an argument also. But do we have any default constructor sorry, do we have any constructor here inside the dog class? No. So internally, this dog class will maintain a default constructor. Default, even though there is no constructor, okay, written by us here in the dog class, but if since you are calling this constructor here, a default constructor will be maintained, but here parent class already has a constructor, guys. This will be inherited by the kind of child class, right? So here, even though you call like this, what will happen? The default constructor, okay, when you call something like this dog Tommy or something, the default constructor will be there here. That is a constructor kind of stuff will be there inside this constructor. Inside this is not visible actually, okay? The doc class is maintaining this kind of default constructor, though I am writing here for so that you can visualize what kind of default constructor the JavaScript language is maintaining here in place of the constructor. Inside this constructor, guys, inside this constructor, there will be something like super of name, okay? Like here, name will be there, okay? Constructor of a default constructor and with super dot name will be maintained here, guys. Okay, this is what a default constructor kind of stuff will be maintained internally, guys. Okay, so even though there is no particular constructor here, but this kind of default constructor will be maintained by the JavaScript language. So assume that this kind of stuff is internally maintained by the dog class, even though you have not created. So this will go to this will call the super will call this parent class constructor and this dot name and all these things are going to work. Okay. So this kind of default constructor will be maintained if the parent class has a constructor. The child class will maintain this kind of default constructor. Okay. So in different situation, different type of default constructors will be maintained by the classes in JavaScript. Let me run this code and see, you see Tommy got printed here, okay? The name Tommy got printed here, okay? So here we have the notes. Let's use the notes for reference, okay? So let me copy these notes and let me open this in the browser here so that you can see the same notes about the default constructors in JavaScript. In JavaScript, a default constructor is what a class gets automatically, okay, if you don't explicitly define one. Okay, if you don't define something, automatically the class will consider a default constructor even though you create an object for that. Okay, even though base class default constructor. Okay, so this kind of empty default constructor will be automatically provided by the JavaScript classes, guys. Okay, whether you write this or not, this kind of thing will be maintained. Okay, so when you create an object for this, okay, so when you create an object for this, automatically this invisible default empty constructor will be called, though is not visible. Okay. So what if a child class extends a parent class and the parent class has this kind of constructor? In this case, the child class will maintain this kind of default constructor. Just now I covered this right here. The child class will maintain this kind of default constructor if in case the parent class has a constructor. And when you're creating when you are creating the object for the child class, even though it doesn't have any constructor, this kind of default constructor will be called if the parent class has a constructor having some parameters. So the third thing that you need to understand here is, okay, let me remove all this stuff. Okay, let me remove all this code and all. If there is no constructor which is written by you inside the class, automatically a default constructor will be, okay, default constructor will be considered by the animal class. Okay, invisible default empty constructor will be maintained by this JavaScript in this animal class. But what if I create a constructor here? Okay, as a programmer or developer of this code, if I really write a constructor here, what will happen? What will happen? What will happen to the default inbuilt empty maintained constructor by the JavaScript language? That will be no more considered. Okay, the moment you create a constructor, the default constructor will be ignored by the JavaScript language. If you don't create the constructor, then only the default constructor. If you create a constructor inside a class, this constructor will be given preference over the default constructor. There will be no more constructor. Okay, no more default constructor. So let's say a is equal to new animal. If I create an object for this, you see what will happen? This constructor will be called instead of the default constructor, and you'll get the output like this. You see, hi will be printed. So hope guys, with a practical demonstration, okay, you understood what exactly are the default constructors in JavaScript. So that's all for this session. See you in the next session. Thank you. Bye bye.